If you've never seen a bride laugh so hard that she almost drops her bouquet into the wedding cake, you haven't truly witnessed love in its raw, ridiculous form. My name is Tahlia Bloom, and I'm a wedding planner, or as my accountant calls it, an emotional stunt woman who moonlights as a logistics manager. I've been in this business for 8 years. I've seen a groom faint, a bride forget her vows, and a mother-in-law faint because the bride forgot her vows. I've stopped fights over seating charts that could have ended marriages before they began. I've had to tell a best man to please stop performing single ladies during the first dance. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for Zoe Carver's toast at Callista Vale's wedding. That day started off deceptively peaceful, like the opening scene of a movie where everything's too perfect to last. The sky above Napa Valley looked painted, streaks of peach and gold brushed against lazy clouds. The vineyards glowed under the setting sun, rows of grapevines curving toward the horizon like nature's own confetti. The bride, Callista Vale, was the kind of woman who made elegance look accidental. She had that golden, effortless glow that made people lean in when she spoke. The groom, Leo Darrow, was her opposite in every way. Tall, quiet, with the kind of jawline that made the photographers fight for angles. I'd planned this wedding down to the last petal. The ceremony was flawless, the dinner service went like choreography. The playlist was timed to the minute. I was ready to call it a victory until I saw Zoe Carver, the maid of honor, at the open bar. Zoe had that mischievous energy of someone who'd been told to behave and immediately decided to do the opposite. Her hair was pinned up with a few rebellious curls escaping, her lipstick slightly smudged, and she was holding a champagne flute like a microphone she hadn't yet been handed. When I walked past her table, she winked at me and whispered, "Tahlia, how long do I have for my toast?" 3 minutes, I said automatically, short and sweet. She laughed, the kind of laugh that promised danger. "Oh, honey," she said, "mine's more of a journey." I should have known right then. The toasts began as usual, sentimental, safe, predictable. The father of the bride cried, the best man made a charming joke about the groom's bad cooking, everyone clinked glasses. I was just about to check on dessert plating when I heard Zoe Carver, the maid of honor, at the open bar. Zoe had that mischievous energy of someone who'd been told to behave and immediately decided to do the opposite. Her hair was pinned up with a few rebellious curls escaping, her lipstick slightly smudged, and she was holding a champagne flute like a microphone she hadn't yet been handed. When I walked past her table, she winked at me and whispered, "Tahlia, how long do I have for my toast?" 3 minutes, I said automatically, short and sweet. She laughed, the kind of laugh that promised danger. "Oh, honey," she said, "mine's more of a journey." I should have known right then. The toasts began as usual, sentimental, safe, predictable. The father of the bride cried, the best man made a charming joke about the groom's bad cooking, everyone clinked glasses. I was just about to check on dessert plating when I heard Zoe Carver, the maid of honor, at the open bar. Zoe had that mischievous energy of someone who'd been told to behave and immediately decided to do the opposite. Her hair was pinned up with a few rebellious curls escaping, her lipstick slightly smudged, and she was holding a champagne flute like a microphone she hadn't yet been handed. When I walked past her table, she winked at me and whispered, "Tahlia, how long do I have for my toast?" 3 minutes, I said automatically, short and sweet. She laughed, the kind of laugh that promised danger. "Oh, honey," she said, "mine's more of a journey." I should have known right then. The toasts began as usual, sentimental, safe, predictable. The father of the bride cried, the best man made a charming joke about the groom's bad cooking, everyone clinked glasses. I was just about to check on dessert plating when I heard Zoe Carver's heels clicking toward the microphone. She stumbled slightly, caught herself, and said, cheerfully into the mic, "Sorry, my shoes are like emotional baggage, pretty but impossible to manage." The crowd laughed. She had them immediately. "Hi, everyone." She waved like she was greeting a talk show audience. For those who don't know me, I'm Zoe, Callista's maid of honor, her ride or die, her unpaid therapist, and, unfortunately for Leo, the keeper of her darkest secrets. A murmur rippled through the guests. I felt my planner instincts tingle, the "oh no" kind. But don't worry, she continued, smiling wickedly. I promised I'd only share the PG-13 ones. The laughter came again, louder this time. Callista's face turned the color of the rosé being poured. Zoe took a sip of champagne and started pacing like a stand-up comedian, warming up for a set. I've known Callista since college. Back then, her love life was a little like the Wi-Fi on campus, always searching, occasionally connected, but never reliable. The audience howled. The groom chuckled nervously. I hid behind a floral centerpiece and whispered to no one, "Please, for the love of all seating charts, do not let this go viral." She used to have a type, and that type was emotionally unavailable, mildly mysterious, and probably in a band. A guy in the back yelled, "Sounds familiar," and everyone laughed again. But then, Zoe said, softening her tone, she met Leo, and suddenly she started showing up on time. She started cooking. Well, trying to cook. There was that one time she set off the smoke alarm and texted me, "Do you think he'll still love me if I almost burned down his kitchen?" And Leo, bless his brave soul, replied, "As long as you didn't burn the wine." The crowd awed. Even I smiled. Okay, I thought maybe she'd land this gracefully. But then Zoe smirked again. Now, I know it's traditional to share a memory, so here's one. Callista once made me delete an entire folder of her dating app screenshots before Leo could find them. The laughter that followed was loud and a little scandalized. Callista covered her face with both hands. Leo looked amused, but also slightly terrified. She called it digital spring cleaning, Zoe went on. I called it deleting evidence. At this point, half the guests were crying with laughter, the other half were whispering things like, "Oh my God, she's actually doing this." I glanced toward the DJ, mouthing, "Do not play anything yet." He nodded, wide-eyed, like I just told him a bomb might go off. But in all seriousness, Zoe said, pausing dramatically, I knew Leo was the one when Callista stopped sending me screenshots of texts that needed decoding. You know, the ones, "He said haha instead of LOL, what does it mean?" She just stopped needing to overanalyze. She was happy. The room went quiet. A good quiet. The kind where even laughter takes a respectful breath. Zoe smiled softly, and honestly, seeing her today, I've never seen her so peaceful, so herself. Leo, you're the only man who didn't scare her off by being too kind. That's magic. The sweetness hung in the air like a sigh of relief. I exhaled. Maybe this was the end. Maybe she'd close with something tasteful. Then Zoe raised a finger. But, since we're being honest, I froze. Let's take a moment to thank Leo for surviving the audition phase. The laughter returned in an explosion. She turned to him, "Buddy, you passed the tests. The random emotional quiz at 2 a.m. test, the watch a rom-com and react appropriately test, the I said I'm fine but I'm not fine test. You aced them all." Leo bowed his head in mock respect. The audience cheered. I had to admit, the girl was killing it. This wasn't a toast. This was a comedy masterclass disguised as friendship. Even the waitstaff paused mid-tray to listen. Then she made the fatal mistake of thinking she could ad-lib. "You know," Zoe said, leaning closer to the mic, "we always joked that Callista would end up with someone who looked like he reads poetry in coffee shops but secretly Googles how to boil an egg. And Leo, you are that dream man. You really are." Leo laughed. Callista was red, but laughing too. It was perfect. She could have stopped there. She didn't. Also, Zoe added, "Remember the night before your first date when you called me sobbing because you accidentally texted him a heart emoji instead of a thumbs up?" The crowd roared. Callista groaned, "Zoe!" "Oh, come on, it's cute," Zoe protested. She literally said, "I'm gonna have to move to another city now." I was laughing so hard I had to turn away. It was chaos, but joyous chaos. And then, just as the laughter began to die down, Zoe raised her glass and said softly, "But really, in a world full of right swipes and wrong people, you two found each other. And if that's not worth toasting, I don't know what is." She lifted her glass, the guests followed, to Callista and Leo. May your love be strong, your Wi-Fi stable, and your group chat screenshots forever deleted. The entire vineyard erupted in laughter, applause, and cheers. It was perfect. But then Zoe tripped over the microphone cord. The feedback screeched through the speakers like a dying robot. Zoe yelped, caught herself, and, because the universe loves irony, spilled champagne all over her dress. She looked down, blinked, and said, "Guess I just baptized myself in bubbly." The laughter doubled. Even Callista was crying from laughter now, kneeling to hug her friend. Leo handed Zoe a napkin, but she waved it off, proudly announcing, "I'm sparkling inside and out, baby." Someone yelled, "Encore!" and she actually started to go back to the mic. I sprinted across the floor faster than I've ever moved in heels and gently pried the mic from her hand. I said, "You did amazing. Let's stop before you start quoting Taylor Swift again." "Fair," she said,
grinning. I peaked. The guests were still laughing, clinking glasses, hugging. The entire mood of the night had shifted from formal to deliriously joyful. I watched Callista whisper something to Zoe that made them both tear up, and I realized something about wedding chaos. Sometimes the disasters are the magic. Because as the laughter faded and the DJ played the next song, I saw what Zoe's speech had really done. She'd reminded everyone, between the jokes, the spilled champagne, and the confession of emoji mishaps, that love isn't perfect. It's messy, funny, embarrassing, and completely worth it. Later that night, as I was packing up extra candles and herding tipsy guests toward the shuttles, Zoe found me near the catering tent. She still had champagne in her hair and mascara under her eyes, but she looked radiant. "Hey, Bloom girl," she said, leaning against a table. "Did I ruin it?" I laughed. "You made it unforgettable." She grinned, brushing a grape off her dress. "Good, because I meant every word, even the inappropriate ones. You know, you should consider stand-up comedy." She winked. "Honey, I just did." As the music floated across the vineyard and fairy lights flickered above, I stood there watching two best friends twirling barefoot on the grass, laughing so hard they could barely breathe. And in that moment, I realized something else. Something every wedding planner secretly knows but rarely says aloud. It's not the perfect speeches that people remember. It's the ones that make them laugh until they cry. And that night, thanks to Zoe Carver and her legendary stand-up toast, I witnessed both. Laughter that turned to tears, chaos that turned to connection. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a love story, told through jokes, champagne, and a girl brave enough to speak the truth in heels too high for her own good. And as I loaded the last box into my car, I whispered to myself, smiling, "Another happy ending with punchlines." So you'd think, after surviving Zoe Carver's champagne-soaked stand-up routine, I'd have learned to sense danger before it reached the microphone. You'd think. Cut to 3 months later, standing on the 12th floor rooftop of the Vireo Hotel in downtown Seattle. The skyline shimmered behind strings of Edison bulbs, rain clouds flirting with the idea of ruining everything. The couple this time were Nora Jensen and Grayson Holt. Both software engineers, both so organized, they had shared spreadsheets for their shared spreadsheets. I remember thinking, finally, a wedding that won't explode. Enter Rafe Holt, the groom's younger brother. Rafe had that kind of easy, dangerous charm that makes people nervous for entirely different reasons. Rumpled tux jacket, perfectly tousled hair, one eyebrow permanently raised like life was his inside joke. He was holding a tablet and a beer at the same time, which, in hindsight, should have been the first red flag. The ceremony went beautifully. The rain held off. Nora cried gracefully. Grayson said all the right vows. The officiant didn't mispronounce anyone's name. We moved into cocktail hour, and I was starting to believe in miracles again. Then Rafe cornered me never bar. "Hey, Bloom," he said. Everyone calls me Bloom once they realize my last name's more fun than my first. Quick tech question. Shoot. How do you connect my laptop to the projector? For what? My toast. Something in my stomach did a slow, uneasy pirouette. "You're doing a presentation?" He grinned like a man confessing to a crime he's proud of. "Just a few slides, visual aids." "Visual aids," I repeated, tasting the words like they were poison. He winked. "Trust me, it's hilarious." I didn't trust him. I really didn't. But he had that family resemblance to the groom and a confidence that made me think maybe it was fine. Maybe it would even be cute. Reader, it was not cute. Dinner service flowed perfectly. Lemon herb chicken, roasted vegetables, perfect plating. I was starting to relax when the MC announced, "And now, please welcome the best man, Rafe Holt." Applause, cheers. Grayson groaned but smiled, that "what's the worst he can do" smile all big brothers wear seconds before impact. Rafe took the mic, balancing his beer on the podium. "Hey everyone, first off, can we just give it up for the newlyweds?" Cheers again, cameras ready. "And secondly, I'd like to thank the venue for having HDMI ports." My heart dropped. A bright blue screen flickered to life on the wall behind him. The title slide read in bold white font, "Reasons My Brother Shouldn't Be Married Yet, a Comprehensive Analysis." The crowd howled. I nearly fainted. Grayson buried his face in his hands. Nora mouthed, "Oh my God." Slide 1 appeared, a baby picture of Grayson covered head to toe in spaghetti sauce. Caption, "Exhibit A, Poor Life Management Skills." Laughter exploded across the rooftop. Rafe clicked to the next slide. Slide 2, teenage Grayson in braces and a trench coat holding a lightsaber. Caption, "Exhibit B, Overestimation of Personal Coolness." Even the waiters stopped mid-tray. I tried to move toward the projector, but a crowd had formed, phones out, people wheezing with laughter. Rafe cleared his throat theatrically. "Now, I know what you're all thinking. How could this adorable dweeb land someone like Nora? Excellent question. Let's look at the data." Slide 3 was a bar graph titled "Grayson's Charm versus Nora's Patience Over Time." The bars were labeled 2008 to now, with Nora's patience line steadily declining until the wedding date. I couldn't breathe. The man had made graphs. Grayson was laughing so hard he could barely sit up. Nora hid her face in his shoulder, red with both horror and love. Rafe said, "Now, some of you might think I'm being harsh, so let's look at his strengths." Slide 4, a photo of Grayson fixing a broken chair, caption, "Handy, in a crisis, or when furniture attacks." Slide 5, a text exchange screenshot reading, "Rafe, you bring chips." Grayson, "Forgot." Rafe, "You had one job." Grayson, "Marriage will teach me responsibility." The laughter turned to applause. People were wiping tears. I leaned against the DJ booth, whispering, "Please, universe, just let it end here." But of course it didn't. Rafe changed tone. "But in all seriousness," he said, lowering his voice, "my brother, he's been my hero since I was old enough to spell the word. I tease him because that's what brothers do, but honestly, he's the reason I even believe people can change." The projector flickered to a final image, a photo of the two of them as kids, Rafe clinging to Grayson's back, both grinning like idiots. Under it, one sentence, "Thanks for always carrying me." The laughter melted into silence, then soft sniffles. He smiled, raising his glass. To Grayson and Nora, proof that even the most chaotic among us can build something beautiful. And to my brother, please, for the love of God, stop texting me for recipe help. Cheers erupted. Nora hugged him. Grayson punched his arm affectionately. Even I teared up a little, the kind of tears you pretend are from champagne bubbles. Afterwards, as the DJ queued up music and guests flooded the dance floor, Rafe came over to me, smug and unrepentant. "So, how'd I do?" I crossed my arms. "I aged 10 years in 8 slides." He laughed. "Worth it though, right?" I sighed. "You know what, Holt? You actually pulled off the impossible. You roasted your brother and still made everyone cry."
"Story of my life," he said, tipping an imaginary hat before disappearing into the crowd. Later that night, as I packed up leftover centerpieces and helped the bartenders corral empty glasses, I found Rafe's laptop still connected to the projector. The last slide glowed softly on the wall. "Family equals the first people you roast because you know they'll laugh." I smiled, unplugged it, and whispered to myself, another wedding saved by humor and PowerPoint. As I locked up, the city hum filled the silence. The rain finally started, gentle and cleansing. I stood under my umbrella, watching Nora and Grayson dance barefoot on the slick rooftop, twinkling lights flickering around them. Rafe snapped a photo, framed them perfectly, then turned and caught me watching. He gave me a little salute. And that's when I realized something I'd later put in my planner journal under lesson number 72. Never underestimate a man with a slideshow and feelings. Because sometimes the funniest toasts carry the heaviest love, hidden between bullet points and bad fonts, waiting to break your heart just after they make you laugh. That night, driving home with the city lights still flickering in my rearview mirror, I thought about Zoe's chaos and Rafe's slides and smiled. Every toast tells a story. Some come in champagne bubbles. Some come in PowerPoint. All of them remind me why I do this, to catch the moments between laughter and love before they vanish into memory. And maybe, just maybe, to keep a spare HDMI cable in my purse.
There are two kinds of wedding disasters, the ones you can predict and the ones that sneak up wearing cologne and calling you kiddo. That second type usually comes in the form of an uncle. Now, I've worked enough weddings to know the signs. The loose tie, the open collar, the slightly overconfident swagger of a man who's decided he's both the life of the party and the after party. But Uncle Bennett Lane, oh, he was a special edition. The wedding was in Mariner's Cove, a sleepy seaside town where seagulls screamed louder than guests, and the air smells like salt and champagne. The couple, Hazel Quinn and Miles Turner, were the kind of couple you'd expect to find on a postcard. Both teachers, both sweet, both utterly incapable of stress. Hazel had asked for something simple, soft, and intimate. So I gave her fairy lights, driftwood centerpieces, and a color palette called Sunset That Doesn't Try Too Hard. Everything was perfect, until the toast. Now, usually I have a system. I keep a mental radar for potential microphone threats. The best man? Safe. The maid of honor? Slightly chaotic, but fine. Parents? Predictable. But then came Bennett. He was Miles's uncle, a retired something, I never quite caught what, and a self-proclaimed wordsmith of the soul. When I first met him during rehearsal dinner, he recited a limerick about wine that somehow ended in a burp. I made a mental note. Monitor this man closely. Unfortunately, on the wedding night, he arrived early and acquainted himself far too quickly with the open bar. By the time dessert was served, Bennett had reached what I like to call philosophical intoxication. That beautiful stage where people think they're profound when they're just rhyming orange with door hinge. He stood up suddenly, clutching his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," he bellowed, voice echoing against the gentle hum of the ocean, "I have words." Hazel froze. Miles groaned. The microphone, innocent and unguarded, waited. I moved to intercept, but he was faster. With the dramatic timing of a Broadway villain, he snatched the mic and stumbled to center stage. His tie was loose, his shoes untied, and his grin wider than the horizon. Now, I didn't plan to make a toast, but inspiration strikes, like lightning. Uninvited, but electric. The guests laughed politely. I whispered to the DJ, "Kill the reverb before he summons ghosts." He cleared his throat. "A poem for love." Oh, no. He held up a crumbled napkin, written just now upon the napkin of destiny. I swear a seagull somewhere cawed in mourning. He began. "Love is like wine. It fills up your cup.
It sloshes and spills when you drink it too rough. It's fizzy, it's dizzy, it's, divine. But don't mix it, my friends, with whiskey or wine. There was a pause, then laughter rippled through the crowd. Bennett took it as encouragement. To Hazel and Miles, the sun and the moon, may your marriage be steady, not ending too soon. May your mornings be bright, your dishes all clean. May your socks never vanish in washing machine. Hazel was laughing now, face red, hand over her mouth. Miles leaned into her, whispering something like, I told you he'd do this. Bennett lifted his napkin again. Part 2. I muttered under my breath, oh, there's a sequel. He continued dramatically, squinting at his napkin like it held the secrets of life. When I met my late wife, the glorious June, she told me I snored like a foghorn in tune. But she loved me, she did, through thick and through rum, and I say to you both, love hard or go home. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Someone actually yelled, encore! Bennett wiped his forehead, panting like he'd just finished a marathon of emotions. He said, I'm not done yet. Oh, God, I whispered. He started pacing. Love is messy. Love is loud. Love is, he pointed at the sky dramatically, seagulls fighting over French fries. You think it's about romance, but it's really about strategy. At this point, Hazel was crying from laughter. Miles was trying to pull him off stage. I hovered nearby with the composure of someone internally screaming but externally smiling. Then Bennett suddenly quieted. His voice softened a little bit, wobbling. You know, he said, my June, she used to say, Bennett, if you ever find someone who makes you laugh when you're mad, marry them before they realize you're not that funny. Silence fell. The wind brushed through the fairy lights. His words, slurred though they were, hit different. He swallowed hard. I look at these two, and I see that kind of laughter. The kind that sticks. The kind that heals. Hazel's mom dabbed her eyes. Miles looked stunned, like his uncle had just shifted dimensions. Bennett raised his glass. So here's to love that outlasts reason, to laughter that forgives, and to remembering, to hydrate between drinks. Cheers erupted, glasses clinked, and someone started chanting, Uncle Bennett, Uncle Bennett! He bowed, nearly tripped on the speaker wire, and recovered with surprising grace. Thank you, I'll be here all night, unless I fall asleep first. The guests roared. I guided him gently away from the stage, taking the mic from his hand. That was quite a performance, I said. He winked. I call it drunk on love and other liquids. Later, as the band played a slow song and couples swayed beneath the fairy lights, I saw Bennett sitting at the edge of the deck, shoes off, feet dangling over the water. He was humming to himself, a soft, broken melody that only people who've loved deeply ever hum. I sat beside him. That was surprisingly poetic, he chuckled. Ah, Bloom, I used to be a real poet. Then life made me an honest one. We watched the tide roll in quietly. He said, you know, people think weddings are about beginnings, but really they're about remembering all the middles you survived to get there. I looked at the happy chaos behind us, the laughter, the music, Hazel and Miles dancing barefoot. And for once, I didn't feel like the manager of a show. I felt like a witness to something true. When I left that night, I found Bennett's crumbled napkin poem on the bar. I smoothed it out, smiling at the messy ink stains. At the bottom, beneath the last rhyme, he'd scribbled one extra line. Love is the hangover worth having. And somehow, I believed him. Driving back through the sleepy coastal roads, I thought about how his toast had started as a joke, but ended as something sacred. Because sometimes the truest words come from the people who don't plan to say them. Sometimes a drunk uncle with a rhyming napkin says more about love than all the choreographed vows in the world. And as I pulled into my driveway just before midnight, I wrote in my planner, Lesson number 83. Never underestimate the poets, especially the drunk ones. Then I laughed, kicked off my shoes, and poured myself one glass of wine. For research purposes, obviously. If I've learned anything as a wedding planner, it's this. Never underestimate a grandmother with good posture and a mysterious handbag. The wedding of Ariel Finch and Damon Kells was set in an elegant vineyard estate. Rolling hills, twinkling lights, the faint scent of wine barrels and rose petals. The kind of place where love feels aged to perfection and chaos is decanted quietly behind the scenes. By now, I was 3 weddings deep that month, running on espresso and adrenaline. I'd handled screaming toddlers, missing rings, fainting bridesmaids, but nothing prepared me for Grandma Estelle. Estelle was Damon's grandmother, a silver-haired legend in pearls and sneakers. The kind of woman who greeted you with a hug, but could also take out a raccoon with her purse if needed. She had bright blue eyes, a perfectly crisp blazer, and an energy that screamed, "I've seen things." The ceremony had gone beautifully. Birds actually sang at the kiss, which, yes, felt scripted by the universe. Dinner flowed like a dream, everyone buzzed on Pinot Noir and romance. And then it was toast time. I had the lineup memorized. Best man, maid of honor, father of the bride, end. Except, halfway through dessert, Estelle leaned toward me at the coordinator's table and whispered, "Sweetheart, where's that little microphone of yours?" I froze. Why? She smiled like a secret agent. "I'd like to say a few words." Now, technically, I could have said no, but have you ever tried denying a grandmother who survived 3 world recessions and 2 hip surgeries? You just don't. "Of course," I said, weakly handing her the mic. Estelle strutted to the center of the dance floor, tapping the microphone with surgical precision. The DJ cut the music. Guests turned, curious. Ariel and Damon exchanged a look that said, "Did you know about this?" They didn't. Estelle cleared her throat. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Estelle Kells. Yes, the one who gave Damon his first sip of champagne at age 13. He's been insufferable ever since." Laughter rippled across the crowd. Estelle waited, basking in the attention. "Now," she continued, voice crisp and mischievous, "when Damon told me he was marrying Ariel, I asked him, 'Is she patient?' He said, 'Yes, Grandma.' I asked, 'Is she funny?' He said, 'She laughs at my jokes.' I said, 'Then she's either a saint or a liar, and both make excellent wives.'" Guests howled. Ariel was laughing so hard her mascara was at risk. Damon's face was a mix of pride and pure terror. Estelle sipped her wine. "I've been married 3 times, she announced proudly. To Harold, who couldn't cook, to Peter, who couldn't dance, and to Al, who couldn't keep his mouth shut. But God rest him, he was fun at parties." A collective gasp laugh swept the room. Even I nearly dropped my clipboard. "Now," she said, wagging her finger, "every marriage has 3 stages. First, the romantic stage, where you think they're perfect. Second, the realistic stage, where you realize they're human. And third, the resigned stage, where you realize you're stuck but too tired to date again." People were crying with laughter. Even the DJ was doubled over behind his booth. She smirked. "You'll get there, my dears. The trick is to make each stage feel like an adventure instead of a chore." Then, without warning, she grew serious. Her tone softened, her voice lowered just enough that even the laughter seemed to hush itself. "When Harold passed," she said, "I thought my story of love was done. I told myself that was it. 1 chapter, closed." She paused. "But then came Peter, and after him, Al. And I realized something. Love isn't one story. It's a library. Some books are short, some are messy, some you reread until the pages tear." A pin drop silence. "And if you're lucky," she added, smiling at Ariel and Damon, "you'll find someone who keeps showing up in every chapter, whether they're the hero, the editor, or the fool who spills coffee on the manuscript." Ariel was crying now, holding Damon's hand. Estelle lifted her glass. "So here's my advice, children. When you argue, and you will, Argue like you're both right. When you love, and you will, love like you're both lucky. And when you drink, pace yourselves, for God's sakes, you're not 20. Cheers erupted. Someone shouted, "We love you, Estelle!" She laughed, winked, and handed me the mic back. "Put that away, dear. The old lady's out of material." Then she dabbed her lipstick with a napkin, poured herself another glass of wine, and started dancing to Bruno Mars like she just dropped a Grammy acceptance speech. Later that night, as I helped the staff pack up centerpieces, Estelle found me again. She asked, "You're the planner, aren't you?" "Yes, ma'am." She leaned close, smelling faintly of roses and rebellion. "You've got a good heart. Don't waste it on someone who doesn't make you laugh." And just like that, she shuffled away, sneakers squeaking on the wooden floor, humming something jazzy and completely off-key. As I watched her disappear to the dancing crowd, I realized something. Every toast I'd ever heard had been about love, but hers was about life. It wasn't rehearsed or poetic. It was raw, hilarious, and heartbreakingly human. When I drove home that night, I replayed her words over and over. Love isn't one story, it's a library. And for once, I didn't rush to write my usual lesson down in my planner. I just let it sit there, soft, warm, and real. Because sometimes the best wedding toasts don't just make people laugh. They remind them that even after everything, love is still worth opening another book for. There's a certain look people get when they realize the best man has had 3 tequila shots and just picked up the microphone. It's a mix of anticipation, fear, and a tiny prayer to any deity available. The wedding of Sienna Dovey and Callum Pierce was supposed to be smooth sailing. Elegant rooftop ceremony, jazz band, city skyline twinkling like confetti. I had everything timed to the second. Sunset vows, champagne toast, first dance. But what I didn't account for was Jasper Lane, Callum's best friend since college, and apparently the self-proclaimed comedy king of Melbourne. When I first met Jasper at the rehearsal, he introduced himself by saying, "I promise to be the kind of best man who leaves a lasting impression." I should have known that was a threat disguised as charm. The night started perfectly. Guests mingled under fairy lights, the band played soft instrumentals, and I was congratulating myself for pulling off another flawless event. Then Jasper tapped the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, family, friends, and anyone who's here for the open bar, good evening." I swear the air shifted. Callum's smile faltered. Sienna grabbed his arm like a hostage reaching for the panic button. He continued, "I'm Jasper, best man, worst influence, and the only person who knows where Callum's tattoo really is." Gasps. Laughter. Immediate chaos. I actually heard Sienna whisper, "If he says the word Ibiza, I'm leaving." Jasper smirked. Let's start from the beginning. I met Callum in university, back when he had hair that could only be described as a warning sign. The audience erupted. He launched into a full 15-minute roast that was less toast and more Netflix special. Every sentence was a setup. Every story got wilder. Callum, he said, once tried to impress a girl by making her pancakes. He forgot the flour, ended up serving her sweet scrambled eggs. The girl was Sienna, and she still married him. So really, who's the crazy one here? Sienna buried her face in her hands, laughing so hard she snorted. The crowd went wild. I stood near the DJ booth, equal parts horrified and impressed. This man had timing. He roasted the groomsmen, the human embodiment of "I'll get to it tomorrow," the flower girl, "I've seen more focus in goldfish," and even the officiant. "Sir, your voice was so soothing, I almost confessed my sins." People screamed. Callum looked like he was deciding whether to laugh or relocate to another country. But then, as the laughter crescendoed, Jasper paused. He looked at his best friend, the groom, red-faced and crying from laughter, and his tone softened. "All right, jokes aside, let me be serious for 1 second before I lose my nerve." The room quieted instantly. Callum and I have been through
every stupid decision imaginable together. We've lost jobs, apartments, and dignity. But through all that, the one thing he never lost was his ability to see the good in people. And when he met Sienna, I swear he glowed like a guy who finally stopped pretending he didn't care. Sienna's laughter faded into tears. He used to tell me, he said, if I ever find someone who calls me out and cheers me on at the same time, I'll marry her. And here she is, beautiful, terrifying, and somehow still laughing at my jokes. The audience melted. The transition from chaos to sincerity was like a cinematic plot twist. So here's my toast, Jasper said, raising his glass. To the man who taught me loyalty, to the woman who taught him peace, and to their future kids, may they inherit her patience and his hairline, because neither can afford the opposite. Roaring applause, glasses clinked. Even I teared up a little, despite still holding my clipboard like a weapon. Afterwards, Callum hugged Jasper so tight I thought they'd both pop. You're a menace, he said, voice cracking. Jasper laughed. Yeah, but you picked me. As guests began dancing, I found Jasper near the bar, sipping water for once. I've officially given me a heart attack, I said. He grinned. Was it good, though? I admit it was terrifyingly perfect. You have a gift. He shrugged. Nah, just the right mix of alcohol and sentimentality. He looked back at the crowd, Sienna laughing, Callum spinning her under the fairy lights, and smiled softly. Truth is, he said, people remember the laughs, but it's the love underneath them that makes the laughs matter. And just like that, the man who nearly derailed a wedding became its emotional anchor. Later, as I packed up empty glasses and folded tablecloths, I wrote in my planner, Lesson number 91. The best roasts come from the people who love you enough to burn you gently. Because weddings, I've learned, aren't about perfection. They're about people being human in the most beautiful, chaotic, ridiculous ways. And sometimes the best man steals the show, not because he's funny, but because behind the laughter, he's telling the truth.
Some toasts begin with laughter, some with tears. And then there are the ones that start with a microphone feedback squeal and end with everyone confronting their childhood trauma. That, unfortunately, was one of those nights. The wedding of Vera Lowell and Jonas Hyde was one of those rare, elegant affairs where every detail whispered, old money but emotionally available. The venue was a renovated greenhouse filled with warm light and orchids that cost more per petal than my monthly rent. Vera, a painter with a laugh like champagne bubbles, had hired me 6 months earlier and immediately said, I just want something simple. Which in bride language always translates to, I want it to look effortless, but also like Vogue might feature it. Everything was smooth, seamless. For once, I thought, I might actually get through a wedding without a crisis. Then came Celeste Hart. Celeste, the maid of honor, was Vera's childhood best friend. A therapist by profession, an overthinker by nature, and, as I would learn that night, a woman incapable of keeping emotional boundaries once Pinot Noir entered the equation. When it was her turn to give her toast, she walked up in soft heels, clutching note cards already crumpled with nervous sweat. Her first words were, Okay, so I didn't write anything funny. I froze mid-sip of water. In my line of work, that sentence is either the start of something deeply moving or deeply regrettable. She glanced at Vera, then at Jonas. I tried to write jokes, but then I realized I'm a therapist. My idea of humor is labeling trauma patterns. The guests laughed nervously. She smiled, encouraged. So I thought, why not just lean in? Oh no. Celeste began pacing slowly, like she was about to deliver a TED Talk on emotional attachment at a wedding. When we were 15, she said, we used to make lists of what our dream partners would be like. Mine always said things like, tall or plays guitar. Hers always said, someone who listens to me when I'm quiet. The room went still. She didn't want someone to fix her.
She wanted someone to see her. And Jonas, she turned to him, eyes bright, you do. You really do. Vera blinked, trying not to cry. Jonas reached for her hand. Okay, I thought, this is good, tender, safe. Then Celeste took a deep breath. And to be honest, this wedding is really emotional for me because watching you two love each other this way has made me realize I've been choosing people who don't see me at all. A collective "oh no" rippled silently through the guests. "Uh-oh," whispered the DJ beside me. She went on, voice trembling but strong. I thought I was okay with that, but tonight, I don't think I am. And I think that's beautiful. Painful, but beautiful. Because it means I still believe in what you two have. The audience had no idea whether to clap, cry, or start a GoFundMe for her therapy bills. Celeste sniffled, laughed awkwardly. Sorry, I'm realizing I might be making this about me. Classic, right? Nervous laughter again. Someone muttered, she's self-aware, at least. Then, as if the emotional temperature hadn't already spiked, she turned to Vera's parents. And Mr. and Mrs. Lowell, I just want to say thank you for loving her through everything, because a lot of us didn't grow up with that kind of steady love. And seeing it, it changes how we think love should look. Mrs. Lowell was now full-on sobbing. Mr. Lowell's stiff upper lip was trembling like a bridge in a storm. Celeste took a shaky breath. Okay, I think I've turned this into a group therapy circle, so I'll wrap it up. She smiled weakly at Vera and Jonas. My toast is this. May you always remind each other that love isn't about perfection, it's about presence. May you forgive fast, listen long, and make room for the other person's weirdness. And if either of you ever forgets how to do that, please call me. I'll invoice you, but still. Laughter broke through the tears. Applause. Relief. Celeste sighed, relieved, and took a big gulp of champagne straight from her glass. God, that was intense, she muttered into the mic. Someone play ABBA before I spiral. The DJ, bless him, immediately hit Dancing Queen. The crowd erupted into dance. Celeste put the mic down, wiped her eyes, and was soon spinning Vera in circles under the string lights, both laughing, mascara-streaked, radiant. I stood by the dessert table, watching as all that tension melted into joy. The best man, a nervous accountant named Theo, came up beside me. Was that normal? I smiled. Define normal. He considered, no one screamed or fainted. Then yes, I said. For weddings, that's a win. Later that night, when the last candle had burned low and the greenhouse smelled of sugar and laughter, Celeste found me outside. She leaned against a column, tipsy and thoughtful. Was that too much? She asked. I smiled. It was raw, but real. And honestly, people needed it. She looked relieved. You think so? I know so, I said. You made everyone feel something, and that's what the best toasts do. Celeste nodded slowly. I guess weddings bring things up, huh? Oh, constantly, I said. That's why I charge extra for emotional damage. She laughed, soft and grateful. You're good at this, you know? Thanks, I said. So are you. As she walked back towards the glowing greenhouse, I watched her blend into the laughter and music. She didn't look broken anymore, just brave. And maybe that's what love does for even the ones not standing at the altar. It wakes you up to what you still believe in. When I finally sat in my car, exhausted but weirdly peaceful, I wrote in my planner, Lesson 102. Sometimes the best toasts heal the people who give them, not just the ones who hear them. I closed my notebook, leaned back, and smiled. Because that's the secret about weddings. No one tells you. Between the chaos, the laughter, and the spilled champagne, someone always walks away believing in love again. Even if it's not their own.
Weddings have their archetypes: the crying bridesmaid, the overconfident best man, the drunk uncle. But the most unpredictable creature of all? The father of the bride. Sometimes he's stoic and sweet.
Sometimes he's a sentimental wreck. And sometimes, just sometimes, he's a retired lawyer who treats a wedding toast like closing arguments in court. That was the case at the wedding of Naomi Vance and Reed Holloway, held in a sprawling countryside manor that looked like it came straight out of a romantic movie. Everything about it screamed luxury, except the bride's father, Mr. Elias Vance, who showed up wearing a tie printed with tiny flamingos and a grin that said, "I'm about to make this interesting." Naomi was a fashion designer, glamorous, composed, the type who always smelled faintly of roses and purpose. Reed was a journalist, with a camera permanently hanging from his shoulder. Together, they were perfection in motion. I had a clipboard, a headset, and a prayer that nobody faint or spill red wine on Naomi's custom silk gown. Dinner wrapped up, glasses refilled. The guests buzzed in that happy lull between courses and dancing. Then Elias Vance rose from his chair with the calm authority of a man who just remembered his daughter's entire wedding was being filmed. He tapped the mic once. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I am Elias Vance, father of the bride, payer of the bills, and by extension, silent co-producer of this fine event." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "First, I'd like to say, I'm thrilled to see so many people here tonight, especially those who RSVP'd maybe. I see you. I remember." Naomi groaned, laughing. Reed hid his face behind his napkin. Now, I'd heard hundreds of Father of the Bride speeches before. They usually start with baby stories and end in sobbing. But Elias, he was different. He had the room eating out of his hand from the first line. He pulled out a folded paper, dramatically clearing his throat. "I had a speech prepared, 5 pages, full of metaphors and advice. But then Naomi told me, 'Dad, please don't make this weird. So instead, I'll make it memorable.'" Oh boy. When Naomi was 8, she came to me crying because a classmate said she wasn't good at art. So I told her, "Sweetheart, one day you'll make something so beautiful, even that kid's mom will try to take credit for knowing you." He smiled at her tenderly. And she did. She made this day, this love, this moment. Ahs filled the room. Then he smirked. "Now, let's talk about Reed." Reed straightened up. "Oh, here we go," he muttered, audible enough to make the crowd laugh again. "When my daughter told me she was dating a journalist, I thought, excellent, someone who asks questions for a living. That'll be fun at family dinners." He looked right at Reed. "But then I met you, and I realized you don't just ask questions. You listen. You really listen, which is rare these days, especially in men, and especially in men dating my daughter." More laughter, softer now, the good kind. Elias continued, voice warm but sharp. "I've watched you two together. The way you bicker like a sitcom couple, the way you compromise like adults, and the way you love like teenagers who don't know heartbreak yet. It's hopeful. And trust me, that's saying something coming from a lawyer." People chuckled. Naomi reached for Reed's hand. "Now, as a father, you imagine this day from the moment they're born. You think you'll give this long, profound speech full of wisdom. But when you get here, all you want to say is, 'Please just be kind to each other.'" He paused, voice lowering just enough that the laughter melted into quiet. Because kindness lasts longer than attraction, longer than excitement, longer than youth. It's the glue that holds love when everything else starts to fade. The room was still. Even I forgot to breathe for a second. Then he smiled again, breaking the moment with perfect comedic timing. "Also, if you ever fight, and you will, remember my rule. Whoever is wrong does the dishes, and whoever is right tells me about it first." Roars of laughter, relief, love, applause. He lifted his glass. "To Naomi and Reed, may your love be a good story, filled with humor, a little suspense, and one very patient editor."
Cheers echoed through the hall, glasses clinking like rain. As he returned to his seat, Naomi threw her arms around him. Reed, still laughing, mouthed, "I'm terrified of him," to the best man, who nodded solemnly. Later that night, while the dance floor came alive and guests forgot the concept of rhythm, I found Elias standing by the open terrace, looking at the stars. "You stole the show," I told him. He grinned. "Old habit. You can't be a lawyer without enjoying a little courtroom drama." "You were funny. And kind." That line about kindness hit everyone. He chuckled. "It hit me too. You know, after my wife passed, I kept thinking, if kindness had a face, it would have been hers. And when I see Naomi with Reed, I see the same thing." His tone softened, more vulnerable now. "She found someone who makes her feel safe. That's all a father wants, really." We stood there for a quiet moment, the night humming with distant laughter and music. Before he left, Elias winked. "You've got a good job, Miss Bloom. You build the beginnings of stories people will tell forever." I smiled. "And you give the kind of toasts people wish were recorded." When I got home that night, my heels abandoned by the door, I wrote in my planner. Lesson 109. The best toasts aren't about showing off. They're about showing up. Because sometimes the people who steal the spotlight aren't the loudest or the funniest, but the ones who remind us that love, real love, isn't grand. It's gentle. It's steady. It's kind. And if you're lucky, you get to witness it from the front row with a clipboard in your hand and tears in your eyes. There's a moment at every wedding, usually right before dessert, when I know whether the night's going to end in chaos or magic. And at Kira Devlin and Jonah Vale's wedding, I felt it. That hum in the air. The collective sparkle that says tonight's going to be legendary. The reception was at an industrial loft in the heart of the city. Brick walls, neon lights spelling out "better together," and a jazz band that looked like they'd time-traveled from a black and white film. It was sleek, modern, effortlessly cool, exactly like the couple. Kira was an art curator with a mind like a gallery, full of wild ideas, bright colors, and unexpected corners. Jonah was a tech entrepreneur who once built an app to remind people to drink water, which, ironically, crashed during his own wedding dinner. Together, they were yin and yang, if yin wore red lipstick and yang owned too many gadgets. I'd planned everything down to the second. The playlist, the speeches, the lighting that shifted with the mood. But one thing wasn't on my schedule: the best man, Silas Reed. Now, Silas wasn't your typical best man. No awkward tux shuffle, no index cards shaking in sweaty hands. He walked to the mic like he'd just stepped off a magazine cover. Rolled sleeves, loosened tie, the kind of confidence that could sell out a TED Talk on charisma alone. "Good evening, beautiful people," he said smoothly, flashing a grin that made at least 3 guests sigh. "I'm Silas, best man, longtime friend, and the poor soul who watched these two fall in love from row 1. The crowd laughed. He had them instantly. I leaned against the back wall, arms folded, smirking. This one's gonna be fun. Silas continued, pacing like a stand-up comic. Now, when Jonah told me he was proposing, I said, "You? Mr. Commitment Issues?" He said, "She's different." And that's when I knew we were in trouble. Jonah groaned, covering his face with his hands. Kira laughed so hard she nearly dropped her champagne flute. "But seriously," he said, gesturing to them both, "watching you two is like watching opposites attract in real time. She's art. He's algorithms. She paints sunsets. He tracks them with code. She'll buy a weird statue from a flea market. He'll 3D print a miniature version of it just to see if he can." The audience chuckled again. He was killing it. Every beat perfectly timed, every joke balancing affection with teasing. Even I felt myself relax, my internal "don't let this turn into a disaster" alarm silent for once. Then he leaned on the mic stand, lowering his voice a notch. "But here's the thing about opposites. They're not meant to cancel each other out. They're meant to create balance. Kira slows Jonah down just enough to let him breathe, and Jonah reminds Kira that sometimes chaos can have structure. He smiled at them, and something softened in his tone. You two make sense, in the most unexpected way, and that's the coolest thing about love. It doesn't always look like what we planned. It looks like who we become when we find our person. The room quieted. Even the jazz band, mid-sax solo, paused. And then, because Silas couldn't resist, he lifted his glass and added, "Also, I'd like to formally thank Jonah for finally making it easy to remember our group chat name. Jonah and Kira forever is way better than single and searching." Laughter rippled again, light, golden, like champagne bubbles rising. When he finished, Kira stood up, hugged him tight, and whispered something that made him smile. A real, quiet smile that didn't belong to the confident showman, but to the friend underneath. I don't usually tear up at toasts anymore. Occupational hazard, I've seen hundreds, but that one hit differently. Because it wasn't just funny, it was cool. Not the kind of cool that tries hard, the kind that feels natural, effortless, the kind that makes you believe in friendship, in timing, in people who get it. Afterwards, I found Silas by the bar. He was sipping whiskey, phone tucked away, just taking in the night. "You," I said, "are dangerously good at that." He grinned. "At what? Drinking or talking?" "Both," I said, "but mostly making a toast sound like a conversation instead of a performance." He shrugged. "That's the trick. Don't make it about impressing the crowd. Make it about saying something real. People can tell when you mean it." I nodded, letting that sink in. "You've done this before, haven't you?" He smirked. "Once or twice. Maybe I just like weddings." "Then you're a rare species. Most men your age would rather fight a bear than give a speech." He laughed. "Depends on the crowd." We both turned to look at Kira and Jonah, now dancing under soft golden lights, her head on his shoulder, his phone finally out of reach. They looked happy. Not in the perfect photo way, but in the real way. The way people look when they've found peace in each other. As the jazz picked up again, I checked my planner, already scribbling a note. Lesson number 110. The best toasts don't need tears or drama. Sometimes being effortlessly cool is enough. That night, as I packed up cables and cue sheets, I caught a glimpse of Silas helping Kira's grandmother to her seat. Still smiling, still unbothered. I realized then, coolness wasn't about image. It was about grace under joy, about meaning what you say and saying it with heart. So yeah, maybe I'd heard more dramatic, more emotional, or even more hilarious toasts. But that night, that toast was the one I wished every wedding could end with. Warm, confident, full of life. Because when people laugh and believe at the same time, you know the story's ending exactly the way it should.
There's a strange quiet that falls after a wedding ends. The lights dim, the laughter fades into echoes, and the last few guests wander out clutching favors they'll probably forget in their cars. And then there's me, standing alone in a room that hours ago held an entire universe of joy. I've planned hundreds of weddings, watched families cry, friends embarrass themselves, and strangers become memories. But the part that always sticks with me, the part I secretly live for, isn't the cake cutting or the kiss. It's the toast. Because a wedding toast isn't really about the couple, not entirely. It's about the people who saw them before they were on us, the ones who remember the stories, the inside jokes, the heartbreaks that led them here. It's where love becomes language, and language becomes legacy. Over the years, I've heard it all. The maid of honor who turned a meltdown into a stand-up routine, the best man who used Shakespeare and tequila in equal measure, the uncle who shouldn't have had the mic, and the father who outsmarted everyone by being wise and funny in the same breath. Each one left something behind. Not confetti or chaos, but truth. A reminder that love, for all its unpredictability, is what keeps us human. Tonight, I'm sitting at my desk, surrounded by candlelight and the faint hum of my old laptop. I've got my notebook open, pages and pages filled with scribbled quotes, moments, lessons. Coffee stains mark the best ones. I flip through them slowly. Love is timing. Kindness lasts longer than attraction. Being real beats being perfect. Cool is just confidence with empathy. Every wedding I've planned, every toast I've overheard, has taught me that there's no single formula for love. No perfect speech, no guaranteed happy ending. Just people. Trying, failing, forgiving, and trying again. I used to think my job was about perfection. Now I know it's about capturing the chaos and calling it beautiful. My phone buzzes. A message from a new client. "Hi, Tahlia. Heard about you from a friend. We're eloping, but we still want someone to make it feel big." I smile. Of course they do. I start typing back. Big doesn't need a ballroom. Just the right words and the right people to hear them. Before I hit send, I glance up at the framed photo on my desk. Me in the background of a dance floor, holding my clipboard, laughing mid-chaos. Someone once told me I looked happiest when things were falling apart, but somehow still working. They weren't wrong. Because maybe that's what weddings really are. 100 tiny things going wrong in the right direction. And maybe that's what love is too. I close my notebook and whisper to the empty room, "Here's to the next toast. Whoever gives it, wherever it happens." Then, just for me, I raise an imaginary glass. To the laughter that fills the air, to the tears that remind us it's real, and to the stories that always find their way back to the heart. One toast, one promise, one unforgettable moment. One toast, one promise, one unforgettable moment.